Well, it's time now for a look at the day's top business news. And for that, I'm joined here in the studio by Brian Quinn from the France 24 Business Desk. Good morning, Brian.
Allison.
Brian, you're starting with a visit to the U.S. by British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. The two countries' economic ties very high on the agenda there.
Indeed, Allison. Sunak meeting with President Joe Biden on Thursday with economy and trade issues, indeed expected to feature heavily. Now, key among those is Biden's Inflation Reduction Act, which includes some $370 billion in subsidies for green energy projects in the U.S. Those subsidies have been criticized as anti-competitive by officials in both the EU and the U.K. Tech issues on the prime minister's mind as well. On Wednesday, he announced the world's first summit on artificial intelligence planned for this fall in the UK. He's also reportedly keen to discuss how to protect Western supply chains and reduce reliance on China for key high-tech components. Now, Sunak is unlikely to push hard for a specific US-UK trade deal. Meeting with US legislators on Wednesday, though, he leaned hard on the allies' economic ties. Here he is.
Being at Arlington this morning just reminds us of the long history between our countries and how we have, when we've stood together, I agree with you, the world has benefited. And what we need to do now is figure out how do we make sure that that relationship is strong to deal with the challenges of the future. I know that's what we're going to be talking about, but particularly strengthening our economies, because that's what it's all about.
Well, let's get a check on the day's trading action now. Asian markets mostly sinking on Monday following Wall Street lower as traders continue to take profits after a big rally last week. Shanghai managing to gain around 0.4%. All other indexes, though, in the red. The Nikkei in Tokyo down 0.8% on Thursday, despite new data showing the Japanese economy expanded by 2.7% in the first quarter. That far above expectations. With the U.S. debt ceiling fight now behind us, investors turning their attention to the next move from the Federal Reserve, where many analysts are expecting next week's meeting to bring a pause in the bank's string of interest rate hikes.
No question, we still have this extremely strong labor environment, and the Fed is definitely struggling with that alongside its inflation fighting efforts. So if they wanted to find data to support another rate increase, they easily could find it. But I think Chairman Powell has really communicated it's likely they're going to take a pass this month.
Well, to China next, where the government says both it and Europe are victims of economic coercion by the United States. That statement comes in the wake of a new trade tool approved by the EU to punish countries who engage in economic blackmail against one of the bloc's members. That move a response to China targeting EU member Lithuania with trade restrictions over its ties to Taiwan. Carolyn Lambelet explains.
The reaction was to be expected. A day after the EU took aim at what it sees as China's economic coercion, Beijing sought to deflect any blame.
Both China and the European Union are victims of economic coercion by the US. The United States has blatantly coerced the European Union and other countries to restrict exports of semiconductor production equipment to China. This kind of technological bullying has seriously impacted the development of the semiconductor industry.
Trouble has been brewing for several years. In 2021, Taiwan was allowed to open a representative office in the Lithuanian capital Vilnius. The move infuriated China, which considers Taiwan as part of its own territory. Beijing withdrew its ambassador to Vilnius and expelled the Lithuanian ambassador to Beijing. According to the EU, Beijing also drastically cut trade with Lithuania, something the bloc considers as economic coercion. After a year of negotiations between EU member states and lawmakers, the bloc announced a new mechanism to tackle the issue on Tuesday. It means that the bloc could impose tariffs, restrict investment, and limit access to public contracts.
We know that we operate in increasingly fragmented and conflictual geopolitical context, so we need to be able to defend our interests and values, also in situations where third countries do not play by the rule.
The new mechanism should come into effect later this year. It still requires approval from the Parliament and all member states.
Finally, for business, TikTok's parent company is reportedly seeking to quadruple its e-commerce revenues this year. Bloomberg says Chinese tech giant ByteDance is targeting up to $20 billion in sales for 2023 to be driven largely by growth in Southeast Asian countries like Indonesia. A TikTok shop is the video sharing app's e-commerce platform. Users can buy merchandise via links during live broadcasts there. ByteDance, though, has faced growing scrutiny from Western governments over concerns that the Chinese government can use its data to track and surveil users. The company, though, still looking to boost its sales in the US and Europe as well via local partnerships. Last year, TikTok brought in $4.4 billion in merchandise sales. I didn't know that you could buy things on TikTok, Alison. There's a lot.
I was going to say
TikTok,
the same thing,
actually.
Brian. Everyone trying to sell you something, right?
Yeah.
All right,
Take it away
Brian.
from it.